A billionaire on the brink of emotional collapse finds a stranger's journal on a city bus. Her words unravel his perfect world and awaken his heart. But will she let him into hers? Before we get into the story, comment below, where in the world you are watching from today? The snow fell lightly across the city as Julian Crestwood stood at his father's grave. At 46, Julian had achieved everything a man could want: a real estate empire worth billions, properties in 3 countries, and a name that opened doors everywhere. But today, none of that mattered. Today, he was just a son saying goodbye to a father he barely knew. "The service was beautiful," said Margaret, his executive assistant, holding an umbrella over them both. Julian nodded, his expression blank. He would have hated it. Too many flowers, not enough business contacts. "Your car is waiting, Mr. Crestwood." Julian stared at the fresh mound of dirt. 20 years of fights, disagreements, and silence. And now there would never be a chance. How to fix any of it? "I'm not taking the car," he said suddenly. I need to think." Margaret's eyes widened. "But sir, it's freezing, and the board meeting." "Cancel it," Julian said, already walking away. "Tell them I'll reschedule tomorrow." He heard Margaret calling after him, but for once in his perfectly controlled life, Julian kept walking. The cold air bit at his face, and it felt good. Real. Something other than the numbness he'd been carrying for weeks. At the main road, he saw a city bus pull up to the stop. Without thinking, he got on, dropping a few bills into the fare box before the driver could say anything. The bus was half empty. Julian chose a seat near the back, ignoring the curious glances from other passengers. It had been years, maybe decades, since he'd taken public transportation. As he settled into the seat, he felt something wedged between the cushions. He reached down and pulled out a small notebook with a floral cover, well worn at the edges. He opened it, intending to find a name or contact information to return it. On the first page, in neat blue handwriting, were the words, "For my sanity. For my son. For the parts of me I'm scared no one will ever see." Julian knew he should close it. This was clearly someone's private journal. But something about those words pulled at him, and before he could stop himself, he turned the page. December 4th. Malik lost another tooth today. He was so proud, showing me the tiny gap in his smile. We made a big ceremony of putting it under his pillow, and I promised the tooth fairy would come. What he doesn't know is that I had to choose between being the tooth fairy tonight or paying the electric bill on time. I chose magic. We can be cold for a few days. Children should believe in impossible things for as long as they can. Julian looked up, suddenly aware he was reading someone's private thoughts. He should put it away, turn it into the driver. But his eyes were already moving to the next entry. December 8th. Double shift again today. My feet are killing me. Mrs. Henderson at the care facility kept calling me by her daughter's name again. I didn't correct her. Sometimes I think the kindest thing we can do for people is let them live in the world they need, not the one that is. When I got home, Malik was already asleep. I sat on the edge of his bed and just watched him breathe. He's growing so fast. 6 years without Daniel, and sometimes I still turn to tell him something about his son. The bus lurched to a stop, and Julian looked up, disoriented. He'd missed his stop, several stops in fact. They were now in a part of the city he rarely visited, where the gleaming towers of downtown gave way to older apartment buildings and small businesses. He should get off, find his way back. Call for his car, but instead he turned the page. December 10th, the rent went up again, $200 more a month. Where am I supposed to find that? Malik asked for basketball shoes for Christmas. The good kind, like his friends have. I smiled and said we'd see. He's old enough now to recognize that means no. I wish I could give him everything. I wish just once I could say yes, without calculating what we'd have to give up in return. The next entry caught Julian's eye immediately. December 12th. I took the bus to work today and watched a woman get on wearing the most beautiful red coat. I've never seen anything that color, like fire and roses mixed together. She looked so confident. I wonder what it feels like to walk into a room and not apologize with your eyes, to just take up space in the world and know you have the right. I'm 39 years old and still waiting for that feeling to find me. Julian checked the date on his watch. Today was December 15th. These entries were recent, just days old. Somewhere in this city, the woman who wrote these words was living this life, working double shifts, worrying about rent, raising a son alone. "Claire, stop, sir," the driver called out, jolting Julian from his thoughts. He looked up, realizing they'd reached the end of the line. Everyone else had already gotten off. "Sorry," Julian said, tucking the notebook into his coat pocket as he stood. "I got distracted." Outside, he pulled out his phone to call for his car, but paused with his finger over the screen. Instead, he opened a map app and found his location. He was miles from his penthouse, in a residential neighborhood he'd probably driven past but never actually seen. The snow was falling harder now, creating a quiet blanket over the streets. Julian began walking, not really sure where he was going. His mind kept returning to the words in the blue ink, the simple honesty of them, the strength it must take to keep going day after day to find hope in small moments. His phone rang. It was Margaret. "Sir, where are you? The board members are getting anxious, and you have that dinner with the mayor tonight." Julian stopped walking. In front of him was a small park, empty now in the cold, the swings moving slightly in the wind. "Cancel everything for today," he said, "and tomorrow too." "Sir, is everything all right?" Julian's hand tightened around the notebook in his pocket. "I'm not sure," he said honestly, "but I need some time to figure it out." After hanging up, Julian found a coffee shop across from the park. He ordered a black coffee and sat by the window, pulling out the notebook again. He knew he should feel guilty for reading someone else's private thoughts, but he couldn't stop. Himself. December 13th. Malik asked about his father again today, wanted to know if he looked like him. I showed him the photos, but they're just paper. They don't show how Daniel's eyes crinkled when he laughed or how he hummed when he was thinking. 6 years gone and I still reach for him in my sleep. But today, for the first time, I thought maybe someday I might want to reach for someone else. Is that betrayal or healing? I don't know the difference anymore. Julian looked up from the page, watching the snow fall outside. When was the last time he'd felt anything so real? His relationships were carefully managed affairs with women who wanted his money or his status. They were transactions disguised as romance. He turned the page, but the rest of the notebook was empty. These few entries were all there was. Julian flipped back through them, looking for a name, an address, anything that might identify the writer. On the inside back cover, he found what he was looking for, in the same blue ink. "If found, please return to Rachel Bennett," followed by a phone number. Rachel Bennett. Now he had a name for the voice that had gotten under his skin. Julian pulled out his phone, his finger hovering over the keypad. He could call the number right now. Tell her he found her notebook, arrange to return it. But what would he say? That he'd read her private thoughts? That somehow, in the space of a bus ride, she'd made him question everything about his life? Instead, he put his phone away and signaled for the check. He needed time to think. That night, Julian sat in his penthouse, the city lights spread out below him like stars. The notebook lay open on his coffee table. He'd read the entries a dozen more times, trying to understand why they affected him so deeply. His father's attorney had called, wanting to discuss the will. His board members had left messages about urgent business matters. But for the first time in years, Julian didn't care about any of it. He thought about Rachel Bennett working double shifts at a care facility, about her son Malik growing up without a father, about the red coat she'd admired but probably couldn't, before Julian picked up his phone and called the one person he knew would help without asking questions. "Dave, I need you to find someone for me," he said when his head of security answered. "Her name is Rachel Bennett. She works at a care facility somewhere in the city. She has a son named Malik, around 6 years old." "What's this about, boss?" "I found something that belongs to her. I want to return it. I can have that information for you by morning." Julian hung up and walked to the window. The snow had stopped, and the city looked clean and new, like a blank page waiting to be filled. He knew what he should do. He should have Dave locate Rachel, send a courier to return the notebook with an apology note for reading it, and then forget about it. Go back to his life. But he already knew he wouldn't do that. For the first time, In as long as he could remember, Julian Crestwood was going to do something unplanned, something real. He was going to find Rachel Bennett, not just to return her notebook, but to meet the woman whose words had somehow reached a part of him he thought was long dead. As he turned from the window, his eye caught the framed magazine cover on his wall. Julian Crestwood, the billionaire who never loses. He'd always been proud of that headline. Now he wondered what winning really meant. The next morning, Julian woke early. He'd barely slept, his mind filled with Rachel's words and the decision he'd made. He dressed simply, jeans and a sweater, instead of his usual tailored suit. His phone chimed with a message from Dave, an address for Rachel Bennett, along with the information that she worked at Sunset Gardens Care Facility. Julian studied the address. It was in the same neighborhood where he'd gotten off the bus yesterday, a modest apartment building, according to the attached photo. He should call first, or send someone else. But he knew he wouldn't. As he was about to leave, his phone rang. It was Margaret. Sir, the board has called an emergency meeting. They're concerned about your absence yesterday, and your father's attorney is insisting on speaking with you about the will. Julian hesitated. This was his life calling him back. The responsibilities and expectations that had defined him for decades. Tell them I'll be unavailable today, he said finally. Family matters. It wasn't exactly a lie. This felt like the most important thing he'd done in years. An hour later, Julian parked his car, not the usual Bentley, but a more inconspicuous BMW, a block away from Rachel's apartment building. He sat there, the notebook on the passenger seat beside him, suddenly unsure. What was he doing here? What did he expect to happen? This woman didn't know him. He was a stranger who had invaded her privacy by reading her most personal thoughts. But he couldn't leave. Not yet. Julian picked up the notebook and got out of the car. The morning was cold but clear. The snow from yesterday, now just patches, on the ground. He walked slowly toward the apartment building, rehearsing what he might say. As he approached, the front door opened and a woman stepped out, holding the hand of a young boy. Julian froze. Even before he saw her face clearly, he knew it was her. Rachel Bennett and her son Malik. She was bundled in a worn coat, her dark hair pulled back from her face. The boy bounced excitedly beside her, talking animatedly about something Julian couldn't hear. They walked right past him, not noticing the man standing still on the sidewalk, a floral notebook clutched in his hand. Julian watched them go, unable to move or speak. In that moment, seeing her in person, the reality of what he was doing hit him. This wasn't a story. This was someone's life. And he was intruding. He turned to leave, to forget this whole strange impulse, when he heard a small voice behind him. "Hey, mister, you dropped something." Julian turned back. Malik was running toward him, holding out a business card that must have fallen from Julian's pocket. Rachel was a few steps behind, watching cautiously. "Thank you," Julian said, taking the card. Up close, the boy's resemblance to his mother was striking. The same warm brown eyes, the same determined set to his chin. "You're welcome," Malik said proudly, then rejoined his mother. Rachel nodded politely at Julian, already turning to continue on their way. "Excuse me," Julian said before he could stop himself. "Are you Rachel Bennett?" She turned back, instantly, wary. "Yes, do I know you?" Julian held out the notebook. "I found this on the bus yesterday." Her eyes widened in recognition, and her hand went instinctively to her bag, as if just realizing it was missing. "My journal," she said, reaching for. "I didn't even realize—" She stopped suddenly, looking from the notebook to Julian's face. "Did you—" "I read some of it," Julian admitted. "I was trying to find out who it belonged to. I'm sorry." Rachel's expression hardened. She took the notebook from him, quickly tucking it into her bag. "Thank you for returning it," she said stiffly. "Mom, we're going to be late." Malik tugged at her hand. "Yes, we are." Rachel turned to go, then paused. "How did you find me?" Julian hesitated. The truth would sound like stalking. "Your number was in the back cover. I was going to call, but—" She looked skeptical but nodded. "Well, thank you again." "Wait," Julian said as she started to walk away. "I'd like to— That is, could I buy you a coffee sometime? To apologize?" "Properly?" Rachel looked at him for a long moment, really seeing him for the first time. Julian knew what she was seeing. A man obviously out of place in this neighborhood, expensive watch peeking out from under his casual sweater, the BMW parked down the street. "I don't think so," she said finally. "Come on, Malik." Julian watched them walk away, the boy looking back curiously over his shoulder. He should let them go. Forget this whole strange detour. Instead, he called after her. "The part about the tooth fairy, choosing magic over the electric bill. That's when I knew I couldn't just turn it into lost and found." Rachel stopped walking. Slowly, she turned back to face him. "You have no right to know those things about me," she said quietly. "Those words weren't meant for you." "I know," Julian said, "and I'm sorry. But now that I've read them, I can't unread. They're them, and I can't stop thinking about them, about you." Behind her eyes, Julian could see a battle taking place. Curiosity versus caution, interest versus instinct. Finally, she spoke. "We have to go. I have work, and Malik has school." "Of course." Julian nodded, accepting defeat. "But," she added after a pause that felt like forever, "there's a coffee shop near Sunset Gardens, the one with the blue awning. I take my break there at 3. Before Julian could respond, she was walking away again, her hand firmly holding Malik's. Julian stood there, watching until they disappeared around the corner. He wasn't sure what had just happened or what would happen next. But for the first time since his father's funeral, maybe for the first time in years, he felt truly alive. He looked down at the business card the boy had returned to him. Julian Crestwood, CEO, Crestwood Developments. By 3 o'clock, Rachel. Bennett would know exactly who he was. The question was, would she still show up, and if she did, what would he say to the woman whose words in blue ink had somehow changed everything? Julian returned to his car, his mind racing. Had he really just invited himself into a stranger's life? And had she actually agreed to meet him? The entire interaction felt surreal, like something from a movie, rather than his carefully managed existence. He checked his watch. It was just after 8 in the morning. 7 hours until he would see Rachel again. 7 hours to figure out what he was going to say to her. His phone buzzed continually with messages from Margaret, the board, his lawyers, the real world demanding his attention. Julian started the car but didn't drive away immediately. Instead, he pulled out his phone and did something he'd never done before. He researched Sunset Gardens Care Facility. The website showed a modest but well-maintained nursing home. Not the luxury type of place he was familiar with, but clean and dignified. The kind of place where staff worked hard for modest pay, caring for people who couldn't afford the premium facilities that Julian's own mother had spent her final years in. On impulse, Julian made a call. "Dave, I need information on Sunset Gardens Care Facility. Financial status, ownership, everything." "On it, boss." Julian drove back to his penthouse, changed into one of his usual suits, and forced himself to attend to his most pressing business, matters. He couldn't simply disappear from his life, no matter how tempted he was by the distraction Rachel Bennett presented. By noon, Dave had delivered a folder to his office. Julian opened it, scanning the contents quickly. Sunset Gardens was struggling financially like many small care facilities. It had been bought 2 years ago by a larger healthcare company, Meridian Care Group, which was making noise about closing it if profitability didn't improve. Julian recognized the playbook. Buy distressed properties, strip the assets, close them down. He'd done similar things himself in real estate, though never with healthcare facilities. He flipped through the folder. Employee records showed Rachel Bennett had worked at Sunset Gardens for 4 years as a nurse's aide. Her personnel file noted her reliability and compassion with patients, but also showed she'd been passed over twice for promotions that would have meant better pay. Julian closed the folder, feeling uncomfortably like a stalker. This was wrong. He was using his resources to pry into this woman's life, far beyond finding her to return a notebook. At 2:30, Julian left his office, ignoring Margaret's protests about missed meetings. He drove to Sunset Gardens, parking across the street from the coffee shop with the blue awning that Rachel had mentioned. It was a small place, nothing like the high-end espresso bars near his office. Julian went inside, ordered a plain coffee, and chose a table near the window where he could see anyone approaching from the care facility. At 3 o'clock exactly, the door opened and Rachel walked in. She'd changed from this morning into a light blue uniform, her hair now pulled back into a practical ponytail. She looked tired, but there was a quiet dignity in how she held herself. She ordered at the counter, then scanned the shop. When she saw Julian, she hesitated for just a moment before walking over to his table. "You're here," she said, "not sitting down yet." "Did you think I wouldn't be?" Julian asked. "I wasn't sure." She placed her coffee on the table and took the seat, across from him. "I looked you up during my lunch break. Julian Crestwood, real estate billionaire." Julian felt strangely exposed. "Yes. Why did you really come looking for me, Mr. Crestwood? I doubt it was just to return a notebook." Her directness surprised him. In his world, people rarely questioned his motives so bluntly. "It started that—" "So wait," he said honestly. "But then I read what you wrote, and I wanted to meet the person behind those words." Rachel took a sip of her coffee, watching him carefully. "So this is what? Curiosity about how the other half lives?" "It's not like that," Julian said, though he wasn't entirely sure what it was like. "Your words, they affected me. Made me think about things I haven't thought about in a long time. Such—" As Julian hesitated, how could he explain without sounding ridiculous? "Real things, simple things, the stuff that actually matters." Rachel laughed, a short, tired sound. "Simple things like paying rent? Like choosing between being the tooth fairy and keeping the lights on? Those simple things?" Julian felt his face flush. I know how it sounds, but yes. The honesty in how you wrote about your life, your son, what you want, it was like hearing a voice I'd forgotten existed." Rachel's expression softened slightly. "You're a strange man, Mr. Crestwood." "Julian, please." "Julian, then." She glanced at her watch. "I have exactly 14 minutes left on my break, so if there's something specific you wanted to say, now would be the time." Julian hadn't planned this far ahead. He'd been so focused on finding her, on seeing her again, that he hadn't thought about what came next. "I'd like to help you," he said finally. Rachel's expression immediately closed off. "I don't need charity." "That's not what I meant," Julian said quickly, though it partly was. "I mean, I'd like to get to know you. Maybe we could have dinner. Sometime, you and Malik." Rachel stared at him. "Let me get this straight. You find my personal journal, read my private thoughts without permission, track me down at my workplace, and now you're asking me to dinner." Put that way, it did sound bad. "I'm sorry, you're right, this was inappropriate." Rachel sighed, a deep, weary sound. "Look, I appreciate that you returned my journal, but this—" she gestured between them, "this isn't going to happen. We're from different worlds, Mr. Crest, Julian, and I've got enough complications in my life." Before Julian could respond, Rachel's phone buzzed. She checked it and stood up quickly. "I have to go. Emergency at work." She gathered her things, then paused. "Thank you for the coffee." "Rachel," Julian called as she headed for the door. "I'm sorry, truly, but I'd still like to see you again." She turned back briefly. "Goodbye, Julian." And then she was gone. Julian sat there, his coffee growing cold. He'd handled that badly, coming on too strong, making her uncomfortable. Just because her words had moved him didn't mean she owed him anything. He paid the bill and walked outside, intending to go back to his office. But instead he found himself crossing the street towards Sunset Gardens. The facility was modest but clean, with a small garden visible through the front windows, despite the winter weather. Julian entered the lobby, not sure what he was doing there. An elderly woman in a wheelchair smiled at him. "Are you looking for someone, young man?" "Yes," Julian said, returning her smile. "I was actually hoping to speak with the administrator." 20 minutes later, Julian was sitting across from Robert Kendall, the facility administrator, a tired-looking man in his 50s. "Mr. Crestwood, I have to say, your interest in our facility is unexpected," Kendall said. "Meridian hasn't even announced the potential closure publicly yet." "I have good sources," Julian said. Tell me about the situation here. Kendall sighed. We serve a community that can't afford luxury care. Most of our residents are on fixed incomes or assistance programs. The reimbursement rates barely cover our costs, and Meridian wants a 20% profit margin minimum. Julian nodded. It was a familiar story in different packaging. What would it take to keep this place open, to make it sustainable? Kendall looked surprised at the question. Honestly? Better reimbursement rates from the government, which isn't happening, or a miracle investor willing to operate at break-even for the good of the community? Julian smiled slightly. I might know someone like that. Mr. Crestwood, if you're serious. I'm always serious about business opportunities, Julian said, standing. Have your financial team prepare a complete overview of the facility's situation. I'll have my people look at it. As Julian left the administrator's office, he caught a glimpse of Rachel through an open door, gently helping an elderly man with his lunch. She was smiling at something the man said, her face transformed by genuine warmth. Julian slipped away before she could see him. This wasn't about her, he told himself. This was just good business. A potential investment opportunity. Even he didn't believe that lie. Back at his office, Julian found himself unable to concentrate on work. Instead, he kept thinking about Rachel's words from her journal, about her tired smile in the coffee shop, about the gentle way she'd helped her patient. At 6 o'clock, Margaret knocked on his door. Sir, you have dinner with the mayor tonight. Your car will be here in 30 minutes. Julian nodded absently, still lost in thought. Margaret, how much do nurses' aides make at places like Sunset Gardens? She looked startled by the question. I wouldn't know, sir. Not much, I imagine. Why do you ask? Just curious. Julian turned to his computer. Find out for me, would you? And also research the going rate for basketball shoes. The good kind. Margaret's expression was confused, but she nodded. Of course, sir. Will there be anything else? Julian hesitated, then made a decision. Cancel my dinner with the mayor, family emergency. After Margaret left, Julian picked up his phone and called Dave again. I need 2 things, he said. First, find me the best children's basketball shoes on the market. Size. He paused, trying to estimate Malik's shoe size from memory. Let's say youth size 4 through 6. Have them delivered to my penthouse tonight. Got it, boss. And the second thing? Julian took a deep breath. I want to place some advertisements, classified ads in all the local papers, posters in the neighborhood around Sunset Gardens, and a social media campaign. What kind of advertisements? Julian smiled. They should all say the same thing. To the woman who writes in blue ink, I think your heart changed mine. Dave was silent for a moment. Boss, is everything okay? I'm not sure, Julian answered honestly, but I think it might be. That night, Julian sat in his penthouse, a dozen pairs of basketball shoes in various sizes arrayed on his coffee table. Next to them lay a stack of papers, his offer to buy Sunset Gardens from Meridian Care Group at a price well above market value. He'd lost his mind. That was the only explanation. He was making business decisions based on emotion, something he'd never done before. And he was pursuing a woman who had made it clear she wasn't interested, like some lovesick teenager. And yet, Julian picked up his phone and opened the folder of photos Dave had taken of the advertisement designs. By tomorrow morning, they would be everywhere in Rachel's neighborhood. Was he really going to do this? Chase after a woman he barely knew because of a few pages in a journal? His finger hovered over the approve button for the ad campaign. This was his last chance to stop, to go back to his normal life, to forget about Rachel Bennett and her blue ink words. Julian pressed approve. The next morning, Rachel stepped off the bus and froze. There on the bus shelter was a poster. To the woman who writes in blue ink, I think your heart changed mine. She stared at it, her heart pounding. It had to be him, Julian Crestwood, the billionaire who had returned her journal and then asked her to dinner. What kind of game was he playing? Rachel tore her eyes away from the poster and continued to work, trying to push it from her mind. But throughout the day, she heard whispers. The same message was on posters all over the neighborhood, in the newspaper, on social media. Everyone was talking about it, wondering who the woman with the blue ink was and who was looking for her. By the end of her shift, Rachel was exhausted and irritated. This felt like an invasion, a public display that she hadn't asked for. She collected Malik from his after-school program and took him home, grateful that at 7 years old he was too young to notice or care about strange messages on posters. After dinner, when Malik was busy with homework, Rachel pulled out her journal, the one Julian had returned. She hadn't written in it since getting it back, somehow feeling that it had been contaminated by his eyes. But now she opened to a blank page and began to write in her familiar blue ink, December 16th. A man found my journal, a billionaire, of all people, and now he's put up posters all over the neighborhood with some romantic nonsense about my words changing his heart, as if a man like that could possibly understand my life or what I go through. As if he has any right to make me into some kind of public spectacle. I should be angry. I am angry. But there's a small part of me, a part I don't want to admit exists, that wonders what it would be like to be seen, really seen, not as a tired single mum, not as the woman who cleans up after the residents, but as someone whose words matter, whose heart matters. Rachel closed the journal, frustrated with herself. This was ridiculous. Julian Crestwood was probably just bored, a rich man looking for entertainment, for something authentic to make him feel better about his privileged life. She wasn't going to play along. The next day, Rachel deliberately took a different route to work, avoiding the bus and the posters she knew would be there. But when she arrived at Sunset Gardens, there was a buzz of excitement in the air. "Did you hear?" one of the other aides asked as Rachel changed into her uniform. "We've been bought. Some billionaire made an offer and Meridian accepted it this morning." Rachel froze. "What billionaire?" "Crestwood, I think his name is. They say he's going to invest in the facility, raise wages, the whole works." Rachel felt the blood drain from her face. No, he couldn't have. That would be too much, too far. She worked through her morning in a daze until Robert Kendall, the administrator, called a staff meeting to confirm the news. Sunset Gardens had indeed been purchased by Crestwood Developments, with promises of facility improvements and better compensation for staff. After the meeting, Rachel marched straight to Kendall's office. "Did Julian Crestwood mention me when he was here yesterday?" she demanded. Kendall looked surprised. "You know Mr. Crestwood." "Did he mention me?" Rachel repeated. "No," Kendall said, looking confused. "Should he have?" Rachel backed down, embarrassed. "No, sorry, never mind." She left quickly, her mind racing. Had Julian really bought an entire care facility just to get her attention? Or was it just a bizarre coincidence? The answer came that afternoon. During her break, Rachel found a small package in her locker. Inside was a brand new journal, bound in soft blue leather, with a note tucked inside. "Rachel, I'm sorry for the posters. Too much too soon. But I meant what I said. Your words made me see things differently. If you're willing to talk again, I'd like to explain. Julian." At the bottom of the note was his personal phone number. Rachel sat down on the bench in the locker room holding the journal. This was crazy. He was crazy. Or maybe she was crazy for even considering responding. She took out her phone and stared at it for a long time. Then slowly she typed a message. "This is Rachel Bennett. The posters were too much. And if you bought this facility because of me, that's completely inappropriate." She hit send before she could change her mind. Almost immediately her phone buzzed with a response. "I know, I'm sorry. But Sunset Gardens is a good investment even without the connection to you. Can we start over? Coffee tomorrow?" Rachel hesitated, then typed, "I'm not used to being seen or found. Tell me what page made you stay." His response came quickly. "Can I show you instead? The library on Maple Street tomorrow at noon." Rachel thought about it. The library was a public place, safe, and she was off work tomorrow. "Okay," she typed finally. Noon. The next day, Rachel entered the library, looking around nervously. She spotted Julian immediately, standing near the bulletin board at the entrance. He was dressed casually again, in jeans and a sweater that probably cost more than her monthly rent. As she approached, he smiled tentatively. "Thank you for coming." "I'm still not sure why I did," Rachel admitted. Julian gestured to the bulletin board. "To answer your question." Rachel looked where he was pointing. There, pinned to the bulletin board, was her journal, the original one with the floral cover. It was open to a specific page, with a bookmark placed carefully in it. Rachel moved closer to read the page. It was her entry about Malik losing his tooth, about choosing to be the tooth fairy instead of paying the electric bill on time. "That's the page," Julian said quietly. "That's when I knew I couldn't just turn it in to Lost and Found. When I realized you were choosing magic for your son, even when it meant hardship for you." Rachel felt tears unexpectedly sting her eyes. "Why would that matter to you?" Julian was silent for a moment. "My father died 2 weeks ago. We weren't close. He was all about the business, the empire, the Crestwood legacy. There was never magic in our house, never warmth, just expectations and acquisitions." He looked down at his hands. "When I read your words, I realized I've been living my life exactly like he lived his. All business, no heart. So what is this?" Rachel gestured between them. "Some kind of midlife crisis? Trying to find meaning by slumming it with the struggling single mum?" Julian winced. "No, God, no, it's..." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "I don't know how to explain it without sounding insane. Your words reached me, made me feel something I haven't felt in years, made me want to be someone different than who I've been." Rachel studied his face. Despite herself, she believed him. There was a raw honesty in his expression that couldn't be faked. "The posters were still too much," she said. "And buying Sunset Gardens? That's just..." "I know," Julian said quickly. "It wasn't just about you, though. After we talked, I looked into the facility's situation. It's a good place, the residents need it, the community needs it. It made business sense, but it also felt like the right thing to do." Rachel nodded slowly. "And the basketball shoes that mysteriously appeared on our doorstep last night, the ones that fit Malik perfectly?" Julian had the grace to look embarrassed. "Too much?" "Way too much," Rachel confirmed, but there was a slight smile playing at the edges of her mouth now. "Malik loves them, by the way. He thinks the Tooth Fairy has connections." Julian laughed, a surprisingly warm sound. "Smart kid." Rachel grew serious again. "Julian, I don't know what this is. I'm not sure what you want from me." "I'd like to get to know you," he said simply. "The real you, not just the words in a journal. And I'd like you to get to know me. Not the billionaire, just me." Rachel took a deep breath. "I have a son. He's my priority. Always. I understand that. And I'm not looking for a savior or a sugar daddy. That's not what I want to be." Rachel looked at him for a long moment. "Coffee," she said finally. "We can start with coffee. Real conversations. No grand gestures, no expensive gifts. Just two people talking." Julian smiled, relief evident on his face. "I'd like that." "And Julian?" "Yes?" Rachel reached out and took her journal from the bulletin board, closing it carefully. "No more reading my private thoughts. If you want to know what I'm thinking, you'll have to ask." Julian nodded solemnly. "Deal." As they walked toward the library cafe, Rachel couldn't help wondering if she was making a huge mistake. But there was something about Julian Crestwood, not the billionaire, but the man who had been moved by her words, that made her willing to take the risk. Besides, it was just coffee. What could possibly happen? The coffee at the library cafe lasted 2 hours. Julian and Rachel talked about everything from favorite books to childhood memories, carefully avoiding the subject of his wealth or her struggles. It was just two people getting to know each other, finding surprising common ground despite their different backgrounds. When they finally left the library, Julian walked Rachel to her bus stop. "I enjoyed this," he said, keeping a respectful distance between them. "So did I," Rachel admitted, "though it still feels strange." "Does it help if I tell you I feel the same way?" Julian asked with a small smile. "This isn't exactly normal for me either," Rachel laughed. "I guess not." The bus arrived and Rachel stepped toward it, then paused. "Malik has a basketball game on Saturday morning at the community center. If you wanted to come..." Julian's face lit up. "I'd like that. 9 o'clock. Don't be late." "And Julian?" Rachel added as she boarded the bus. "No fancy cars, no designer clothes, no drawing attention." Julian nodded, understanding completely. I'll be just another parent in the bleachers." "You're not a parent," Rachel corrected him, but her tone was gentle. "Just another spectator then," Julian amended. As the bus pulled away, Julian stood watching until it disappeared around the corner. He felt lighter somehow, as if a weight he hadn't known he was carrying had been lifted. Saturday morning found Julian sitting in the bleachers of a noisy community center gym, wearing jeans and an old college sweatshirt. Around him, parents cheered, as two teams of young boys chased a basketball across the court. Julian spotted Malik immediately, wearing his new shoes and playing with intense concentration. Rachel sat a few rows ahead, unaware of Julian's arrival. He watched her for a moment, noticing how she leaned forward whenever Malik had the ball, her whole body tense with hope and excitement. When Malik made a basket, his team's first points of the game, Rachel jumped to her feet, cheering louder than anyone else in the gym. Julian felt a strange tightness in his chest. This was what real life looked like. Not board meetings or charity galas or acquisitions. This was what mattered. He made his way over to Rachel, who looked surprised but pleased to see him. "You came," she said, making room on the bench beside her. "I said I would," Julian replied, sitting down. "Malik's good." Rachel beamed with pride. "He practices every day at the playground, stays out until I drag him home for dinner." They watched the rest of the game together, Julian finding himself cheering just as loudly as Rachel when Malik's team pulled ahead in the final quarter. After the game, Malik came bounding over, flushed with victory and the joy of playing. "Mom, did you see my shots?" "Every single one," Rachel assured him, giving him a quick hug. "You were amazing." Malik suddenly noticed Julian. "Hey, you're the man who dropped his card," Julian smiled. "And you're the boy who returned it. Great game today." Malik eyed him curiously. "Are you friends with my mum?" Rachel and Julian exchanged a glance. "Yes," Rachel said carefully. "Julian is a friend." "Cool," Malik said, already distracted by his teammates calling him over. "Can I go get pizza with the team? Coach said all the parents are invited too." Rachel hesitated, and Julian knew she was mentally calculating if she could afford it. "My treat," he said quietly, just to her. "For the whole team. As a congratulations." Rachel looked like she wanted to refuse, but Malik was watching hopefully. "That would be nice," she conceded. "Thank you." The pizza restaurant was chaotic, filled with excited boys reliving every moment of the game. Julian sat with Rachel at a table slightly removed from the main group, watching as Malik laughed with his friends. "He's a great kid," Julian said. Rachel smiled softly. "He is. He's been through a lot losing his dad so young, but he's resilient." "Like his mother," Julian observed. Rachel glanced at him, then back to Malik. "We do what we have to do." Julian was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Would you tell me about Daniel, if that's not too personal?" Rachel seemed surprised by the question. "Most men don't want to hear about the ex." "He's not an ex. He's Malik's. Father, he's important." Rachel studied Julian for a moment, then nodded. "Daniel was a teacher, high school history. We met in college and got married right after graduation. He was kind. The kindest person I've ever known, always helping others, always seeing the best in people." She smiled at a distant memory. "He used to say that history wasn't about dates and wars. It was about understanding why people did what they did. About having compassion even for those who made mistakes." Julian listened, watching the love and loss play across her face. "When I got pregnant with Malik, Daniel was so excited. He had all these plans, teaching him to ride a bike, coaching his basketball team." Rachel's voice caught. "He was driving home from a school event when a drunk driver hit him. Malik was only one." "I'm sorry," Julian said softly. The words felt inadequate. Rachel wiped away a tear. "It was 6 years ago. We've built a life without him, but..." She looked over at Malik. "Sometimes I see Daniel in the way Malik laughs or how serious he gets when he's concentrating, like today, playing basketball." Julian wanted to reach for her hand, but didn't. Instead, he said, "Thank you for telling me about him." Rachel nodded, composing herself. "What about you? You've never been married?" Julian shook his head. "Never found the right person? Or maybe never looked hard enough?" He paused. "My parents had what you might call a business arrangement rather than a marriage. My father valued success over happiness. My mother just faded away over the years. She died when I was in college. I'm sorry, Rachel echoed his earlier words. The Crestwood legacy was always the priority, Julian continued. Building the empire, making more money, acquiring more properties. When my father died, I realized I'd been living exactly the same way, without even questioning it. Until you found my journal, Rachel said, understanding dawning in her eyes. Until I found your journal, Julian confirmed, and read about someone who chose magic over practicality, who found joy in small moments, who loved deeply and honestly. Rachel looked away, embarrassed by his candor. Those were just private thoughts. They were truth, Julian said simply. Something I hadn't encountered in a very long time. Before Rachel could respond, Malik bounded over to their table. Mom, can Julian come to our house for movie night? I want to show him my basketball card collection. Rachel looked startled. Malik, I'm sure Julian has other plans. I don't, actually, Julian interrupted. I'd love to see your card collection, but only if your mom says it's okay. Malik turned pleading eyes to Rachel. Please, Mom, he bought pizza for everybody. Rachel gave Julian a look that said he wasn't playing fair. All right, she said finally. Movie night it is. 3 hours later, Julian sat on Rachel's worn couch in her small apartment, watching as Malik carefully showed him each of his prized basketball cards. The apartment was modest but warmly decorated, with photos of Malik at various ages covering one wall. Julian noticed there were only a few that included Daniel, a handsome man with Malik's same serious expression. This one's worth $15, Malik was saying, holding up a card. But I'm never selling it. A wise investment strategy, Julian said solemnly, making Malik grin. Rachel appeared from the kitchen with bowls of popcorn. Movie time. Malik, go wash up first. After Malik dashed off to the bathroom, Rachel sat on the other end of the couch. I should warn you, we're watching Space Jam for approximately the 100th time. Julian laughed. I've never seen it. Rachel looked scandalized. Never. It's a classic. I didn't watch many movies as a kid, Julian admitted. My father thought they were a waste of time. Something in Rachel's expression softened. Well, you're in for a treat. According to Malik, it's the greatest film ever made. The movie night was unlike anything Julian had experienced before. The three of them crammed onto the small couch, eating popcorn and laughing at the same scenes. Halfway through, Malik fell asleep leaning against Julian's arm, exhausted from his basketball game. I should move him to his bed, Rachel whispered. Let me help, Julian offered, carefully lifting the sleeping boy. He followed Rachel to a small bedroom decorated with basketball posters and gently laid Malik on the bed. Rachel pulled off his shoes and covered him with a blanket, brushing his hair back from his forehead with a tender touch. Back in the living room, Rachel turned off the TV. Thank you for today. Malik had a great time. So did I, Julian said, and meant it. This was nice. Nice, Rachel teased. High praise from a billionaire. Julian smiled ruefully. I deserved that. He moved toward the door. I should go. Rachel walked him to the door, suddenly awkward. Julian, She hesitated. I'm not sure what this is between us, and I need to be careful. For Malik's sake. I understand, Julian said. We can take... Do it slow. Get to know each other, no pressure. Rachel nodded. Thank you. On impulse, Julian reached for her hand, squeezing it gently before releasing it. Good night, Rachel. Good night, Julian. As Julian drove home to his empty penthouse, he realized that for the first time in years, perhaps ever, he'd spent a day completely present in the moment. Not checking emails, not taking calls, not thinking about the next deal. Just experiencing life. A basketball game, pizza with noisy kids, a silly movie, the weight of a sleeping child in his arms. It felt real in a way his normal life never did. The next few weeks fell into a pattern. Julian and Rachel would meet for coffee during her breaks. He attended every one of Malik's basketball games. Sunday movie nights became a regular occurrence, with Julian dutifully catching up on all the children's classics he'd missed. At work, Julian surprised his board by redirecting the company's focus. Instead of luxury developments, He began looking at affordable housing projects and community investments. When questioned, he simply said it made good business sense to diversify. Only Margaret, who had worked with him for years, noticed the change in him. "You seem different lately, sir," she observed one day. "More relaxed." Julian just smiled. "Do I? I hadn't noticed." But he had noticed. He felt different, lighter, more purposeful. The emptiness that had haunted him since his father's death, if he was honest long before that, was filling with something new, something real, and it terrified him. Because the more time he spent with Rachel and Malik, the more he realized how much he wanted to be part of their lives, not as a benefactor or an occasional visitor, but as something more permanent. The thought of losing them, of going back to his old life, was becoming unbearable. But Rachel remained cautious, though she was warming to him, allowing him glimpses of her life and her heart. She kept careful boundaries between them. Julian respected this, never pushing, never assuming, until one evening in January when everything changed. Julian was at home, reviewing proposals for a new community development near Sunset Gardens, when his phone rang. It was Rachel, her voice tight with panic. "Julian, I'm sorry to bother you, but Malik's hurt. We're at Memorial Hospital. He fell at basketball practice and his arm..." Her voice broke. "They think it's broken. They want to do surgery, but my insurance, it has a high deductible and I can't..." "I'm on my way," Julian said, already grabbing his keys. "Don't worry about anything else. Just be with Malik. I'll be there in 20 minutes. At the hospital, Julian found Rachel in the waiting room, her face pale with worry. When she saw him, she stood, clearly torn between pride and desperation. "I shouldn't have called you," she began. "It's not your responsibility." "Rachel," Julian said firmly, "where is Malik?" "They're prepping him for surgery. He needs pins." In his arm. "But the financial counselor said our insurance won't cover everything, and I need to put down a deposit before they'll proceed." Julian took her hand. "Consider it handled. Now take me to Malik." In the pre-op area, Malik lay on a gurney, his small face brave despite the pain. His arm was immobilized, and an IV dripped pain medication into his vein. "Hey, champ," Julian said, keeping his voice calm, despite the anger he felt at seeing the boy in pain. "Rough day, huh?" Malik tried to smile. "Coach says the best players get the worst injuries," Julian laughed. "Your coach is a wise man." "They're going to fix my arm," Malik said seriously, "but Mom's worried about the money. I heard her talking to the doctor." Julian exchanged a glance with Rachel, then looked back at Malik. "The only thing you or your mom need to worry about is getting you better. The rest is taken care of, okay?" Malik nodded trustingly. "Will you stay with Mom? She pretends she's not scared, but she is." Julian's throat tightened. "I promise. I won't leave her side." A nurse came to take Malik to surgery, and Rachel bent to kiss his forehead, whispering words of encouragement. Julian squeezed the boy's good hand, then stood back as they wheeled him away. In the waiting room, Rachel finally broke down, the stress and fear overwhelming her composure. Julian pulled her into his arms without hesitation, holding her as she cried. "He'll be fine," Julian murmured into her hair. "He's strong, like his mother." Rachel looked up at him, her eyes red. "I can't accept your money, Julian. This isn't why I called you." "I know that," Julian said gently. "You called because you needed support. The money is just logistics. It doesn't matter." "It matters to me," Rachel insisted. "I don't want to be a charity case." Julian took her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. "Listen to me, Rachel Bennett. You are not a charity case. You are the woman I've fallen in love with. And Malik is the boy I've grown to care about, more than I thought possible. So please, just this once, let me help." Rachel stared at him, stunned by his declaration. "You love me?" Julian hadn't meant to say it like this, in a hospital waiting room with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. But now that he had, he knew it was true. "Yes," he said simply. "I love you. I think I started falling the moment I read your words in that journal. And every day since has only made me more certain." Rachel shook her head, disbelieving. "Julian, you don't really know me." "I know you choose magic over practicality," he interrupted. "I know you work harder than anyone I've ever met. I know you love your son with a fierceness that takes my breath away. I know you're kind to elderly patients that everyone else has forgotten. I know you laugh with your whole body when something's really funny, and I know you're afraid to trust me, to trust this, because you've lost too much already." Rachel's eyes filled with fresh tears. "It's not that simple." "It is for me," Julian said. "I love you, Rachel. You don't have to say it back. You don't have to feel the same way. But please, let me be here for you and Malik tonight without worrying about what it means or what comes next." Rachel studied his face for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "Okay." They sat side by side in the waiting room, Julian's arm around Rachel's shoulders, her head eventually coming to rest against him as the hours passed. When the surgeon finally appeared, they stood together, hands clasped tightly. "The surgery went well," the doctor said. "We placed 3 pins to stabilize the fracture. Malik is in recovery now and you can see him soon. He'll need physical therapy, but kids heal quickly. He should make a full recovery." Rachel sagged with relief, and Julian steadied her. "When can we take him home?" she asked. "Tomorrow, if all goes well overnight," the doctor replied. "He'll need to stay in a cast for about 6 weeks and we'll schedule follow-up appointments." After the doctor left, Rachel turned to Julian. "Thank you," she said softly, "for being here, for—" She gestured vaguely, encompassing everything he'd done. Julian smiled. "Always." The next day, Julian helped bring Malik home, the boy proudly, sporting a blue cast already decorated with signatures from the hospital staff. Julian had arranged for a comfortable recliner to be delivered to the apartment so Malik could keep his arm elevated, and a stack of new games and books to entertain him during his recovery. As Malik dozed in his new chair, exhausted from the hospital stay, Rachel pulled Julian into the kitchen. "We need to talk," she said, her voice serious. Julian nodded, preparing himself for what he assumed would be her setting boundaries again, telling him he'd overstepped. "What you said last night," Rachel began, "about loving me." "I meant it," Julian said quietly. "I know you did." Rachel took a deep breath. "And that's what scares me, Julian. We come from completely different worlds. Your life is boardrooms and penthouses. Mine is double shifts and discount groceries." "Those are just circumstances," Julian argued. "They're not who we are." "But they shape us," Rachel countered. "They define our choices, our perspectives." She looked toward the living room, where Malik was sleeping. "And it's not just me, it's Malik too. He's already getting attached to you. If this doesn't work out—" "Who says it won't?" Julian asked. Rachel gave him a sad smile. "Be realistic, Julian. The novelty will wear off. You'll go back to your world, and we'll go back to ours." Julian felt a surge of frustration. "That's not fair. I'm not some tourist in your life, Rachel. What I feel for you, for both of you, is real." "Maybe it is," Rachel conceded. "But is it enough? Can you really be happy with movie nights on a second-hand couch, with basketball games at the community center, with a woman who works as a nurse's aide and a boy who isn't yours?" "Yes," Julian said without hesitation, "because that second-hand couch feels more like home than my penthouse ever has. Because those basketball games matter more than any business deal. Because you and Malik have shown me what really matters in life." Rachel's expression softened. "I believe you mean that now. But Julian, love isn't just feelings. It's choices. Hard ones sometimes." "Then let me make those choices," Julian said, taking her hands in his. "Let me prove that this is real." Rachel looked down at their joined hands. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not just of getting hurt myself, but of Malik. Getting hurt. He's already lost one father." Julian's heart twisted at the implication that he could be something like a father to Malik someday. "I would never hurt him," he promised. "Or you." Rachel met his eyes. "I need time, Julian, to be sure, for all our sakes." Julian nodded, understanding. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." He hesitated, then added, "But Rachel, I need you to know something." "What?" "I love you," Julian said simply. "And that's not going to change, no matter how much time you take." Rachel's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "You're making it very hard to be cautious, you know." Julian smiled back. "Good." In the living room, Malik stirred awake. "Mom, Julian, can we have ice cream? The doctor said ice cream helps bones heal." Julian and Rachel exchanged an amused look. "Did he now?" Rachel called back. "Well, I guess we can't argue with medical advice." As they went to join Malik, Julian caught Rachel's hand, squeezing it gently. She squeezed back, and in that small gesture, Julian found hope. The weeks that followed brought a new rhythm to their lives. Julian spent most evenings at Rachel's apartment, helping Malik with homework, making dinner while Rachel rested after long shifts. He learned to navigate the small kitchen, to operate the temperamental washing machine, to be useful in ways his privileged upbringing had never taught him. At work, he delegated more, prioritizing his time differently. His board members noticed, but didn't comment, especially when his new community-focused projects began showing promising returns. One evening in February, Julian arrived at Rachel's apartment to find her sitting at the kitchen table, a blue journal open in front of her, the leather one he'd given her. "I've been writing again," she said, closing it as he entered. Julian smiled. "Good, I'm glad." "I've been writing about you," Rachel admitted. "About us, about this journey." Julian hung up his coat. "Should I be nervous?" Rachel shook her head. "No. But I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about love being real, about choices." Julian sat across from her, his heart suddenly racing. And I realized something," Rachel said, her voice soft but certain. "I realized that I've been so focused on protecting myself, on protecting Malik, that I've been afraid to admit what I already know." "Which is?" Julian prompted when she paused. Rachel met his eyes. "That I love you too." The words hung in the air. Between them, simple and profound. Julian felt as if his heart might burst with the joy of hearing them. "You do?" he asked, needing to be sure. Rachel nodded. "I do, and it terrifies me, but it's true. Somewhere between returning my journal and sitting with me all night at the hospital, you became essential to me. To us." Julian reached across the table, taking her hands in his. "Rachel, let me finish," she said gently. "I love you, but I need you to understand what that means. I'm not just me, I'm Malik's mother. We're a package deal, and loving me means accepting that responsibility too." "I already love Malik," Julian said immediately. "You know that." "I do," Rachel acknowledged. "But loving a child you spend time with is different from being a parent figure. It's hard, Julian. It's exhausting and messy and sometimes thankless." Julian looked at her steadily. "Rachel, when I say I love you, I mean all of you. Your life, your struggles, your son. I don't want to change any of it. I just want to be part of it." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "Even if it means giving up parts of your world, your penthouse, your lifestyle." Julian laughed softly. "Rachel, haven't you noticed? I've barely been to my penthouse in weeks. This," he gestured around the small apartment, "this feels more like home than anywhere I've ever lived." Rachel stood then, moving around the table to stand in front of him. Julian rose to meet her, and for the first time, she initiated. The embrace, wrapping her arms around his neck. "I love you, Julian Crestwood," she whispered. "Not the billionaire. Just you." Julian held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the warmth of her against him. "And I love you, Rachel Bennett, the woman who writes in blue ink." Their lips met in a kiss that felt like coming home, like finding something precious that had been lost, like the beginning of a story neither of them could have written alone. From the hallway came the sound of Malik clearing his throat. "Gross," he said, but he was grinning. "Does this mean Julian's going to be around even more now?" Rachel pulled back slightly from Julian, but kept her arm around his waist as she turned to her son. "Would that be okay with you?" Malik pretended to consider this seriously. "I guess so, as long as he keeps making those pancakes on Saturdays." Then more hesitantly, "Does this mean, like, is he going to be my stepdad or something?" Julian felt Rachel tense beside him, the question too direct, too soon. He squeezed her waist gently, then stepped forward. "Malik," he said, crouching, down to eye level with the boy. "Right now it just means I love your mom and I care about you a lot. The future, we'll figure that out together, all three of us. Is that okay?" Malik nodded, looking relieved. "Yeah, that's cool." Then, with the resilience of childhood, he moved on. "Can we have pizza for dinner since Mom's happy and stuff?" Rachel laughed, the tension broken. Sure, pizza it is. As Malik ran off to find the menu from their favorite place, Rachel looked at Julian with wonder. How did you know exactly what to say to him? Julian shrugged. I just said what felt true. We are figuring this out together. Rachel leaned her head against his shoulder. I've been independent for so long, Julian. I'm not sure I know how to share my life with someone again. We've got time, Julian assured her. All the time in the world. That night, after Malik was asleep, Julian and Rachel sat on the small balcony outside her apartment, sharing a bottle of wine Julian had brought. The city spread out below them, lights twinkling in the darkness. It's not the view from your penthouse, Rachel said, following his gaze. It's better, Julian replied honestly. Everything looks different from here. Rachel settled against him, her head on his shoulder. Tell me something I don't know about you. Julian thought for a moment. When I was 10, I wanted to be an architect. Not to build an empire like my father, but because I loved the idea of creating spaces where people could be happy. Homes, not just houses. What happened? Julian sighed. My father happened. He said architecture was fine as a hobby, but a Crestwood needed to think bigger. By the time I was in college, I'd forgotten I ever wanted anything else. Rachel was quiet for a moment. It's not too late, you know, to build spaces that make people happy. Julian looked down at her, struck by the simplicity and wisdom of her words. You're right. It's not. What would 10-year-old Julian think of your life now? Rachel asked. Julian smiled. He'd be confused by the business empire. Impressed by the cars, probably, but he tightened his arm around her. He'd think I was the luckiest man in the world to have found you. Rachel tilted her face up to his. And what does 46-year-old Julian think? That 10-year-old Julian was smarter than he knew. Julian said softly, bending to kiss her. Later, as Julian prepared to leave for the night, they'd agreed he would keep staying at his own place until they figured out next steps. Rachel handed him something. I want you to have this, she said. It was a key, a simple house key on a plain ring. Are you sure? Julian asked, understanding the significance. Rachel nodded. I'm sure. This way, you can come home anytime. Home. The word echoed in Julian's mind as he drove back to his penthouse. Not his penthouse, Rachel's apartment. That was home now. The place where the woman he loved wrote in blue ink. The place where a boy with a healing arm and a generous heart had made space for him. The place where, for the first time in his life, Julian Crestwood felt truly, completely himself. As he entered his silent, perfect penthouse, Julian made a decision. Tomorrow, he would start making changes. Big ones. Because Rachel was right. It wasn't too late to build spaces where people could be happy. Starting with the space in his own heart, which had finally found its true purpose. The spring brought changes, both subtle and profound. Julian sold his penthouse, much to the shock of his business associates. He bought a modest house in Rachel's neighborhood, with a backyard big enough for a basketball hoop and a room for Malik to call his own on the weekends he stayed over. Are you sure about this? Rachel had asked when he first showed her the house. It's so different from what you're used to. Julian had just smiled. That's kind of the point. They settled into a rhythm, spending some nights at Rachel's apartment and others at Julian's new house. Malik's cast came off, and he returned to basketball with renewed enthusiasm, especially now that he had his own court to practice on. Julian's business continued to evolve as well. He created a new division of Crestwood Developments focused exclusively on affordable housing and community spaces. The Sunset Gardens Care Facility became a model for other facilities he acquired, with fair wages for staff and reasonable rates for residents. One evening in late April, Julian arrived at Rachel's apartment to find her and Malik engaged in what appeared to be a serious discussion at the kitchen table. Everything okay? Julian asked, noticing Rachel's tense expression. Malik jumped up. Mom won't let me go to basketball. Camp this summer. All my friends are going. Rachel looked tired. We talked about this, Malik. It's expensive and it's overnight for 2 weeks. You've never been away from home that long. Julian kept his expression neutral, knowing better than to immediately offer to pay. That had been an early lesson in their relationship, respecting Rachel's independence. "It sounds like a big decision," he said diplomatically. "What's the camp like?" Malik launched into an excited description of the elite basketball camp, coached by former NBA players, with specialized training and even college scouts sometimes visiting the older groups. "It's the best camp ever," Malik concluded. "And coach says I have real potential, but it costs a lot." He looked down, his enthusiasm dimming. "I know we can't afford it," Rachel sighed. "It's not just the money, though that is a factor. It's also sending you away for 2 weeks. You're only 7, Malik. Almost 8, Malik protested. "And Julian could come visit me, right? Since he knows all about basketball stuff." Julian and Rachel exchanged a glance. Malik had been doing this more lately, casually integrating Julian into family decisions, creating a space for him in their lives. "Why don't you finish your homework while your mom and I talk?" Julian suggested gently. After Malik retreated to his room, Rachel slumped in her chair. "I hate saying no to him all the time." Julian sat beside her. "You're not saying no all the time, you're making careful choices like parents should." Rachel gave him a grateful smile. "The camp is almost $3,000, plus equipment he would need. It's just not possible." Julian took her hand. "What if it wasn't about the money? Would you still have concerns?" Rachel considered this. "He's never been away from home for more than a sleepover. 2 weeks is a long time." "It is," Julian agreed. "But it might also be an amazing opportunity for him to build confidence, to focus on something he loves." Rachel studied him. "You want to pay for it?" "I want him to have the opportunity," Julian corrected. "And yes, I can easily afford it. But I know it's not my decision." Rachel was quiet for a long moment. "This is one of the hard parts about us, about blending our lives. Your resources are so different from mine. I don't want Malik to expect things I can't provide on my own." Julian chose his next words carefully. "Rachel, I'm not trying to replace you or take over, but I am here and I do care about Malik. Isn't it possible that my being in your lives might mean different opportunities, not because I'm buying affection, but because I genuinely want good things for both of you?" Rachel sighed. "I know. And I'm not being fair, it's my pride getting in the way." Julian squeezed her hand. "Your pride is one of the things I love about you. Your independence, your strength. But sometimes love means letting people help, doesn't it?" Rachel leaned her head against his shoulder. "When did you get so wise?" "I read it in a journal once," Julian teased. "Something about choosing magic over practicality." Rachel laughed, softly. "Touché." She straightened up, decision made. "He can go to the camp, but we're splitting the cost." Julian knew better than to argue. "Deal." When they told Malik, his reaction was worth every penny. He launched himself at both of them, wrapping them in a fierce hug. "Thank you, thank you, thank you," he exclaimed. Then, with the directness of children, "Does this mean you guys are getting married?" Rachel froze. Julian felt his heart skip a beat. They hadn't discussed marriage, though he'd certainly thought about it. "Malik," Rachel said carefully, "Julian and I care about each other very much. But decisions like that take time." Malik looked between them. "But he's always here, and I stay at his house sometimes, and he helps me with homework and comes to all my games." "That's what dads do, right?" Julian caught Rachel's eye, giving her the space to respond first. This was delicate territory. Rachel drew a deep breath. "Honey, you had a dad who loved you very much. Julian isn't trying to replace your father." "I know that," Malik said with a child's impatience. "But he could still be my stepdad, right? Like Miguel's mom got married again, and now Miguel has a stepdad, and he still remembers his real dad." Julian knelt down to Malik's level. "Malik, I care about you and your mom very much, and being part of your lives is the best thing that's ever happened to me. Whatever happens in the future, that won't change." Malik seemed satisfied with this answer, his mind already moving on to the basketball camp. "Can we go shopping for new shoes this weekend? Coach says I need better ankle support." Rachel laughed, the tension broken. "Yes, we can look for shoes. Now finish your homework." Later that night, after Malik was asleep, Julian and Rachel sat on her small balcony, the spring air warm around them. I'm sorry about Malik's question, Rachel said. He's been thinking about this more than I realized. Julian took her hand. You don't need to apologize. It's natural for him to wonder. Rachel was quiet for a moment. What about you? Do you wonder about it too? Julian's heart raced. About marriage? Rachel nodded, not quite meeting his eyes. Yes, Julian said simply. I've thought about it. Rachel finally looked at him. And? Julian turned to face her fully. Rachel, I love you. I love Malik. These past months have been the happiest of my life. Of course, I've thought about making it permanent. But, Rachel prompted, hearing the hesitation in his voice, but I know you're still cautious, still protective of Malik, of yourself, and I respect that. I don't want to rush you. Rachel's expression softened. It's not just caution anymore, Julian. It's wanting to be sure we're doing this for the right reasons, that we're building something real, not just reacting to feelings. What would make you sure? Julian asked gently. Rachel considered the question. Time, I suppose. Seeing that this works in the everyday, ordinary moments, not just the dramatic ones. Julian nodded. Then that's what we'll do. Take time. Live our lives together. No pressure, no rush. Rachel squeezed his hand. Thank you for understanding. Julian lifted her hand to his lips. Always. The next month brought an unexpected development. Julian's purchase of Sunset Gardens had led to improvements throughout the facility, including higher wages for staff and better training opportunities. Rachel had qualified for a nursing program that would allow her to advance from aide to licensed practical nurse. It's a 1-year accelerated program, she told Julian excitedly. I'd still work part-time, but with classes 3 days a week. Rachel, that's wonderful, Julian said, genuinely thrilled for her. You'd be amazing. There's just one catch, Rachel admitted. Even with my employee tuition assistance, it's still expensive, and the part-time hours would mean less income during the year of training. Julian wanted to immediately offer to pay for everything, but restrained himself. What are you thinking? Rachel took a deep breath. I'm thinking about selling my car. It's not worth much, but it would help, and cutting back on everything non-essential. Julian nodded, considering. Those are practical steps. What about your apartment? That's your biggest expense, right? Rachel looked surprised. I couldn't give up our home. Where would we live? Julian hesitated, then decided to take the risk. With me. In my house. Not just on weekends, but all the time. Rachel stared at him. You're asking us to move in with you? Permanently? Yes, Julian said, more confident now. It makes practical sense. You'd save on rent. The house is closer to Sunset Gardens and the nursing school. Malik already has his own room there. Those are all practical reasons, Rachel said slowly. What about the emotional ones? Julian took her hands. Emotionally? I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to hear Malik's footsteps running down the hallway. I want the house to feel like a home, which it only does when you two are in it. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. Julian, it doesn't have to be forever if you're not ready for that, Julian added quickly. Think of it as a practical arrangement. Say during your school year. If it doesn't work out, you can always find another apartment. Rachel laughed through her tears. You're getting better at this, you know. Making it hard for me to say no. Julian smiled. Is that a yes? Rachel nodded. It's a yes, for the school year. We'll see after that. Julian resisted the urge to pump his fist in victory. Instead, he pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply. So you won't regret it. I better not, Rachel warned, but she was smiling. Telling Malik about the move was easier than they expected. He was thrilled at the prospect of living in the basketball house full-time. The actual moving process was more complicated, with Rachel insisting on keeping much of her furniture in storage. Just in case. Julian didn't push. He understood her need for a safety net, for the assurance that this was her choice, not a situation she was trapped in. By June, they were settled into a new routine. Rachel began her nursing classes, thriving in the academic environment. Julian adjusted his work schedule to be home when Malik finished school, discovering a talent for helping with homework and science projects. Weekends were filled with basketball, games, movie nights, and increasingly, dinners with neighbors and new friends. For Julian, the most surprising change was how quickly his business associates adapted to his transformation. After the initial shock of his relocation and company restructuring, many expressed admiration for his community-focused initiatives, which were proving both profitable and beneficial to the neighborhoods they served. "You've found your purpose," his CFO remarked during a strategy meeting. "It shows in everything you're doing now." Julian couldn't argue with that assessment. He had found his purpose, not just in business, but in life. And it had started with a floral notebook found on a city bus. July brought Malik's basketball camp. Rachel was a bundle of nerves as they drove him to the sprawling sports complex, where he would spend 2 weeks. "He has his phone to call us," Julian reminded her, as they helped Malik settle into his dormitory. "And we can visit on the weekend." "No," Rachel said, straightening Malik's bed for the 3rd time. "I'm being ridiculous." "Oh, you're being a mom," Julian corrected her gently. Malik, for his part, was too excited to notice his mother's anxiety. He was already making friends with his roommates, comparing basketball shoes and discussing their favorite NBA players. The key goodbye was harder on Rachel than on Malik, who gave them each a quick hug before running off to join the other boys, heading to orientation. In the car driving home, Rachel was quiet, wiping away occasional tears. "He'll be fine," Julian assured her. "He's resilient like his mother." Rachel nodded. "I know, it's just, he's growing up so fast. First basketball camp, then what? College? Moving away?" Julian laughed. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. He's still 7. Almost 8, Rachel corrected, mimicking Malik's insistent tone, which made them both laugh. The house felt strangely empty without Malik's energetic presence. Julian and Rachel found themselves talking more in the evenings, sharing stories they hadn't told before, learning new layers of each other's lives. "Tell me something about your father," Rachel asked one night as they sat on the back porch. "Something good." Julian was quiet for a moment, searching his memories. "He taught me to play chess when I was 6. He wasn't a patient man generally, but with chess he took his time, explained each piece, its value, its purpose. He said business was like chess, always thinking several moves ahead." Rachel nodded. "And what about your mother?" Julian smiled sadly. "She loved music. Classical mostly, she played the piano beautifully. Sometimes when my father was away on business, she would play for hours. Those were the only times I saw her truly happy." "Did you inherit her musical talent?" Julian shook his head. "Not at all. I took lessons because it was expected, but I never had her gift." He paused, thoughtful. "She gave up a promising career as a pianist to marry my father. I don't think she ever quite recovered from that loss." "Do you think she regretted it? Marrying him?" Julian considered the question. "I'm not sure she saw it as a choice. In her world, in that time, marriage and family were the expected path. But I think she missed the life she might have had." "That's sad," Rachel said softly. "It is," Julian agreed. "It's also why watching you pursue your nursing degree means so much to me. You're choosing your path, adding to your life, rather than subtracted from it." Rachel leaned against him. "I couldn't do it without you." "Yes, you could," Julian said immediately. "You'd find a way. That's who you are. I'm just glad I can make it a little easier." They visited Malik over the weekend, finding him thriving, full of stories about basketball drills and new friends. His coaches praised his work ethic and natural talent, confirming what they'd already known. Malik had found his passion. "Can I come back next year?" he asked on the drive back to camp after their visit. Rachel and Julian exchanged a glance. "If you keep up your grades and continue to work hard, we'll consider it," Rachel said. Julian noticed the "we" in her statement, the casual acknowledgement of their partnership in parenting decisions. It warmed him in a way he couldn't quite explain. The second week of camp passed quickly, with Malik calling each evening to share the day's highlights. When they finally picked him up, he seemed taller somehow, more confident, his face sun-browned and beaming. "Coach says I have a natural talent for point guard," he announced on the drive home. "He says if I keep practicing, I could play in high school and maybe even college." "That's wonderful, honey," Rachel said, reaching back to squeeze his knee. "We're so proud of you." "Julian, can we practice those drills Coach showed us when we get home?" Malik asked eagerly. "Absolutely," Julian agreed, "after you've unpacked and rested a bit." The rest of the summer passed in a happy blur. Rachel continued, her nursing studies excelling in her classes. Julian's community housing projects began to receive national attention, with other developers looking to replicate his model. Malik practiced basketball relentlessly, his skills improving daily. By August, it was hard to remember a time when they hadn't been a family. The lines between yours and mine had blurred into ours. Our home, our weekend plans, our future. Julian found himself thinking more and more about making it official, about asking Rachel to marry him. But he had promised to give her time, to let their relationship evolve naturally. The decision was taken out of his hands on a warm evening in early September. Rachel had been acting strange all day, distracted and nervous. After Malik went to bed, she joined Julian on the back porch, carrying a small wrapped package. "What's this?" Julian asked as she handed it to him. "Open it," Rachel said, her voice betraying her nervousness. Julian unwrapped the package to find a blue leather journal, identical to the one he had given her months ago. "Turn to the first page," Rachel instructed. Julian opened the journal and began to read. "For Julian, for the man who found my words when I thought no one was listening. For the future we might write together." Below this inscription was a single question, written in Rachel's familiar blue ink. "Will you marry me?" Julian looked up, stunned. Rachel was watching him anxiously, her hands twisting in her lap. "Rachel," he breathed, "are you sure?" She nodded, tears gathering in her eyes. "I've never been more sure of anything. These past months, seeing you with Malik, building this life together, I don't want it to be temporary or conditional anymore. I want it to be real, permanent." Julian set the journal aside and pulled Rachel into his arms. "Yes," he said simply. "Yes, I will marry you." Rachel laughed through her tears. "Really? You don't mind that I asked instead of you?" Julian shook his head, his own eyes damp. "I love that you asked. It's perfect. You're perfect." Their kiss was tender, full of promise and shared dreams. When they finally pulled apart, Julian reached into his pocket. "I've been carrying this around for weeks," he admitted, pulling out a small velvet box. "Waiting for the right moment." Rachel gasped as he opened it to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. "Julian, may I?" he asked, taking the ring from the box. Rachel nodded, holding out her trembling hand. Julian slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit. "How did you know my size?" she asked, admiring the way the diamond caught the porch light. Julian smiled sheepishly. "I may have borrowed one of your other rings to get it measured." Rachel laughed. "Sneaky." "Strategic," Julian corrected, pulling her close again. "Like chess, always thinking ahead." The next morning they told Malik over breakfast. His reaction was everything they had hoped for, pure joy, with just a touch of "I knew it all along" smugness. "Does this mean Julian is officially my stepdad now?" he asked around a mouthful of cereal. "Once we're married, yes," Rachel confirmed, "but he's already part of our family." Malik considered this, then asked the practical question, "Can I be best man at the wedding?" Julian laughed. "I can't think of anyone better for the job." Planning the wedding brought new dimensions to their relationship. Rachel, practical as always, wanted something small and intimate. Julian was inclined to agree, having little interest in the society weddings his peers typically hosted. "Just family and close friends," Rachel said as they made their initial plans. "Nothing extravagant," Julian hesitated. "There is one thing I'd like if you're comfortable with it." "What's that?" "I'd like to hold the ceremony at Sunset Gardens," Julian said, "so the residents can attend. Many of them have become like family to us both." Rachel's eyes softened. "Julian, that's a wonderful idea. Mrs. Henderson would be so disappointed if she missed it. And we could have the reception in the garden," Julian continued, warming to the idea. "It's beautiful in October, so it was decided. They would marry at Sunset Gardens in mid-October, with Malik as best man and Rachel's closest friend from nursing school as maid of honor. The guest list was small, staff from the care facility, neighbors, a few of Julian's business associates, who had become genuine friends, and Malik's basketball coach and teammates. As the date approached, Julian found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. from a chance discovery on a city bus to a shared life and future. From loneliness to family, from emptiness to purpose. The night before the wedding, after a small rehearsal dinner at their home, Julian found Rachel in their bedroom, writing in her blue journal. "Pre-wedding jitters?" he asked, sitting beside her on the bed. Rachel shook her head, closing the journal. "Just capturing the moment. Tomorrow everything changes." "Does it?" Julian asked softly. "Or is it just making official what we already know is true?" Rachel smiled. "Both, I think." She leaned against him. "Are you nervous?" "Not about marrying. You," Julian said honestly. "That's the easiest decision I've ever made. I'm a little nervous about my vows, though. I want to get the words right." "They'll be perfect," Rachel assured him. "Because they'll be true." Julian kissed her forehead. "I should go. Bad luck to see the bride before the wedding and all that." Rachel laughed. "You're really sleeping in the guest room?" "Tradition is." "Tradition," Julian insisted, though in truth he simply wanted to give her space to process this transition, to honor the significance of what they were doing. "I love you," Rachel said as he headed for the door. "In case you were wondering." Julian smiled. "I never doubted it." The wedding day dawned clear and crisp, the October sun casting a golden light over the gardens at Sunset Gardens. The staff had decorated with simple white flowers and greenery, transforming the space into an intimate wedding venue. Julian stood at the makeshift altar, Malik beside him in a new suit, both of them watching the path where Rachel would appear. The residents of Sunset Gardens filled the front rows, many of them dressed in their finest clothes for the occasion. When the music began, a string quartet playing softly, Julian felt his heart race. And then Rachel appeared, walking alone down the path in a simple ivory dress, carrying a bouquet of wildflowers. She had chosen to walk herself down the aisle, a symbol of the strength and independence that Julian so admired. As she approached, their eyes locked, and everything else faded away. There was only Rachel, her smile radiant, her eyes filled with the same wonder Julian felt. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. They had written their own vows, each promising not perfection, but presence. Not a fairy tale, but a real story written together. "Rachel," Julian said when it was his turn, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Before I met you, I was living someone else's life, my father's legacy, not my own choice. Your words in blue ink woke me up, reminded me what matters, showed me what love really looks like." He took her hands in his. "I promise to choose magic over practicality when it matters, to value the simple joys we create together, to be a partner in this journey, not just for you, but for Malik too. And most of all, I promise to listen, to really hear you, for all the days we have together." Rachel's eyes shimmered with tears as she began her vows. "Julian, you found me when I wasn't looking, when I'd convinced myself that the kind of love you offer wasn't possible for me anymore." She squeezed his hands. "You saw me, really saw me, not just the tired single mom or the woman working double shifts, but the person behind those roles, the heart still hoping." Her voice grew stronger. "I promise to trust this journey we're on, even when it scares me, to be your partner in building a life that matters, to show Malik what real love looks like, and to keep writing our story together, one day at a time, in the bluest ink I can find." Malik handed them the rings, simple gold bands they had, chosen together. As Julian slipped the ring onto Rachel's finger, he felt a sense of rightness, of coming home. "By the power vested in me," the officiant said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Their kiss was brief but profound, sealed with the applause and cheers of everyone gathered. Malik was the first to embrace them both, his arms stretching, to encompass his mother and new stepfather. The reception was exactly what they had wanted: simple food, good music, and genuine joy. The residents of Sunset Gardens were the guests of honor, many of them sharing stories of Rachel's kindness over the years and Julian's quiet generosity since taking over the facility. As evening fell, lanterns illuminated the garden, casting a warm glow over the celebration. Julian found a quiet moment to slip away, returning to where it had all begun, the city bus stop just outside Sunset Gardens. Rachel found him there, concern in her eyes. "Everything okay?" Julian nodded, taking her hand. "Just taking a moment to appreciate the journey. It started right here, or close enough." Rachel looked at the bus stop, understanding dawning. "The notebook." "The notebook," Julian confirmed. "If I hadn't gotten on that bus that day, someone else would have found it," Rachel said practically. Julian shook his head. "But they wouldn't have read it, or if they did, they wouldn't have been changed by it. Your words were meant for me to find, Rachel. I believe that." Rachel leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "Maybe you're right. Maybe some stories are meant to be written together." Julian wrapped his arm around her waist. "Speaking of which, I have something for you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small package. Rachel unwrapped it to find a pen, an elegant fountain pen with deep blue ink. "For the next chapter," Julian explained. Rachel smiled up at him, her eyes filled with love. "And what do you think that chapter will be about?" Julian kissed her softly. "I don't know. That's the beauty of it. We get to write it together." Hand in hand, they walked back to their wedding reception, to Malik and their friends, to the life they had built from an unexpected beginning. As they rejoined the celebration, Julian caught sight of Mrs. Henderson, the elderly resident who often confused Rachel with her daughter. Today, her eyes were clear as she watched them dance. "You found each other," she said when they stopped by her chair. "Just like I always said you would." Rachel smiled, not correcting the woman's confusion this time. "Yes, we did." "And now you're writing a new story," Mrs. Henderson continued, her aged hand reaching for theirs. "Make it a good one." "We will," Julian promised, feeling the weight of the simple gold band on his finger, the warmth of Rachel's hand in his. Later that night, after the guests had gone and they had returned home, their home now officially shared, Julian found Rachel on the back porch, already writing in her journal with her new pen. "Starting the next chapter already?" he asked, sitting beside her. Rachel smiled, not closing the journal this time. "Just the first page. The rest will have to live before I can write it down." Julian read the words she had written, the blue ink shining in the porch light. "October 15th. Today I married Julian Crestwood. Not the billionaire, but the man who found my words when I thought no one was listening. The man who chose magic over practicality. The man who showed my son that love can come into your life when you least expect it. The man who loves you more than he ever thought possible," Julian added softly. Rachel leaned against him, closing the journal. That part I already knew. Inside, Malik slept soundly, his new family complete. Outside, the stars shone over the modest house that had become a home. And between them, Julian and Rachel held the promise of all the words yet to be written, all the pages yet to be filled, all the chapters of a story that had begun with a simple floral notebook and blue ink. A story of finding hope when you least expect it, of seeing the beauty in ordinary moments, of choosing love again and again with your eyes wide open, a story still being written, one day at a time, in the bluest ink they could find. The end.